A good crowd turned out for the inaugural Australian Banana Racing Championships. It was billed as the most bent event of the year. The aim was for entrants to ride their inflatable bananas and paddle the width of Coffs Harbour Olympic Pool in a relay race with a difference. Any team racing without a banana was disqualified. Some people were more skilled than others.
It's the type of competition that no one takes too seriously and anyone can get involved in.
The money raised from the event will go to charities in Coffs Harbour.
Well, the Busybodies Australian Banana Racing Championships is to raise money for the Coffs Harbour Charity Queen Quest of the Sapphire Quest. It's a local charity fund, so it means that our hospital and local charity organisations can get some needy help.
Teams splashed their way to the final, with prizes totalling $4,000 donated from Coffs Harbour businesses.
It brings everyone back down to the same level, so there's no elitism in this sport, it's just a lot of fun.
Given the success this year, organisers hope the event may one day become a national competition.
Big Tom and Angela Tao are set to make their mark on the local tattoo trade, along with 15 similar businesses around Newcastle and the Central Coast. Tom is busy renovating his studio, a former florist shop, but last night he says thieves came in through the back door, stealing $7,000 worth of tattoo guns and colours.
Sort of people that would have broken in here are people that don't want me around, which I'm not too worried about.
Tom averages about 5 tattoos a day at around $100 each. He's fully booked for the next month. His customers are prepared to wait for as long as it takes for the finishing touches to works in progress.
I'll just come back as soon as I get the stuff ready. I'll come back as soon as I get in and get them all done.
Today, paramedic Alan Playford was teaching CPR and resuscitation techniques to the Adamstown Carers Group.
Less than 10% of the Australian population know any or have the vaguest idea of how to perform life-saving procedures of someone who dies in the community like this. And with those kind of percentages, then we're condemning a sizable proportion of preventable heart attacks, drownings and otherwise to an unnecessary death each year.
There are more than 28,000 coronary-related deaths in Australia each year. According to Alan Playford, many lives could be saved if people knew what to look for and how to respond.
And I think a little girl indeed owes a life to the off-duty police officer and his wife that have not only recognised the signs of when someone's drowning, but actually knew what to do, have provided expired air resuscitation, indeed saved a life.
Present Parliamentary Leader Wal Murray will not be standing at the next election, and he could possibly step down from the leadership as early as next month. Only one contender, Conservation and Land Management Minister Gary West, has publicly acknowledged his leadership aspirations. Others thought to be interested are Agriculture's Ian Armstrong and Ian Causley from Natural Resources. Mr Souris might be remaining mum, but it is accepted that senior National Party members are keen to have him at the helm. They remain confident he will take up a nomination in a leadership ballot.
It's known as day stay, and that's exactly what happens. A patient checks into the hospital in the morning, has the operation, sleeps off the anaesthetic in the recovery room, and then spends a couple of hours resting in an armchair. Later the same day, the patient is allowed to go home. The advantage to the healthcare system is that although the person comes into the hospital for an operation, they don't require a much-needed bed overnight.
The idea behind the unit is that for those patients who are having procedures who don't actually need to be in a bed, we're actually going to be using recliner rocker chairs.
Dr Smythe says the day stay unit will reduce waiting lists for some types of surgery. It's estimated that about 6 gynecology patients per day will be treated in this way, leaving extra beds free for ear, nose and throat patients.
What the unit will be doing is enabling us to increase the amount of surgery, particularly gynecology and ear, nose and throat surgery, to reduce the long waiting lists for those procedures.
Day stay surgery is already carried out at some private hospitals in the region. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
If you're the chairman and owner of a National Basketball League team, you get the rights to some special tuition. John Horsell may not have been landing too many baskets, but he has landed a lucrative sponsorship deal from FAI.
Well, we think we're on the way to putting the end to the woes and securing our financial future. It's very, very difficult. The league's growing all the time. The cost of fielding a team is growing all the time.
Last year, the club was rumoured to be in financial trouble. This year, they say they've got their $1.5 million running expenses covered. The FAI deal is said to be a 5-figure sum each year for the next 3 years. There are extra arrangements for national advertising. The Falcons now have 9 major sponsors.
Visitors are allowed. Do him a kiss. Oh. Thank you. Oh. That's right. Hey, Diane, you're all right. Any kisses that you like? A kiss. Bye. There you go, there's some Easter eggs too.
Neil Parsons, Stephen Nunn and Stephen Piggott were spearfishing off Nobby's Beach early this afternoon. They were hoping to catch some fish for Easter. Instead, they were in the water just 10 minutes when they were confronted by a school of whaler sharks.
How quick they come around after you speared the fish. It was only like a matter of a couple of minutes, and there was 4 of them circling around, and then we knew that they were going for that.
Realising the sharks were highly aroused by the dead fish, the men started swimming to shore. They tried to take their catch with them.
As we picked the catch up, a big fella cruised in. He was about 6-7 foot long, and that's when they started
snapping at the fish and knocking the buoy out of the water and just boiling in the water trying to get the fish off us.
The men say the attack was frenzied. They were about 13 metres from the school when the thrashing began. As they swam, they dragged the mowong behind them. This is what's left of the fish. The men were swimming in this black area behind me when they noticed the sharks. The water there is no more than 2.5 metres deep, and it's about 50 metres from the flagged area of the beach where people were swimming. Beach Inspector Warren Smith closed the beach immediately.
With the water sort of very warm as it is at the moment, plenty of food around, they do sort of come around early morning and late afternoon, not so much during the middle of the day. And to be so active and to come in and attack a fish like that was in the man's hand, that presents a danger to the swimming public, so therefore we have to close the beach.
Divers were also told of the danger and warned not to go into the water.
The Lutheran Church in East Lismore was one of the many churches along the North Coast to hold Good Friday services. Traditionally, Easter is a time of renewal for the Christian faithful. It marks not only the crucifixion of Jesus, but the belief that he made the supreme sacrifice to wash away all earthly sins, and that he rose again to eternal life. Minister Mike Psyche recited the Easter story to the congregation, telling of Jesus being confronted by the Romans before he was arrested and crucified.
When Jesus said to them, "I am he," they stepped back and fell to the ground. Again he asked them, "Whom are you looking for?" They answered, "Jesus of Nazareth."
The Central Coast met again this morning to hone their set plays before tomorrow's final. The only concern the Gosford boys have about their opponents is the influence of former Cronulla player Gavin Miller, who captain coaches the ACT side.
He's got a lot of strings to his bow, and we'll just have to be on our toes in defence and stop him.
The local pack is awesome. Grant Fife is the hooker between two huge bookends in the form of Paul Hill and former Balmain star David Brooks. Both props are able to slip a ball away under pressure and run up the middle all day. Behind them they have a couple of hitmen in Justin Kidd and Billy Martin. Martin is already tipped to be included in the New South Wales country origin side. The back line has enormous speed and is capable of turning a try on from anywhere on the paddock. Coach Peter Young hasn't drilled his side repeatedly on fitness. He's been concentrating on working runaround moves.
We've been training a fair bit for this, and this is the last throw of the dice for us, so we've got to win it.
The final starts at 2:30 tomorrow afternoon at Gosford's Graham Park. Heading the list of homegrown talent is Newcastle's William O'Neill. He teamed up with Thomas Perret against Gosford brothers Peter and Mark Moraga. The style of O'Neill, the difference between the two pairings. Also on court today, impressive Tuggerah youngster Elizabeth Petty. In a coup for tournament organisers, in their first year of the Open, they've tied up a sponsorship with Cathay Pacific, and they've offered a 4-day trip for two for both men's and ladies' winners.
Scientific and fire brigade officers sifted through what remains of the Wakefield Camping Centre. The building was used by Newcastle and Hunter Valley children with intellectual disabilities. During periodic visits to the centre, the students would learn independent living skills. However, last night's fire demolished the dormitory and damaged the kitchen, dining room and toilet block.
Well, it means that the program will be delayed during the course of the year while we have to look at reconstructing the facility.
Arson is suspected. When the fire brigade arrived at the scene last night, the adjacent water tanks were emptying. This morning they discovered signs of a forced entry and a fire extinguisher discarded some distance from the buildings.
Will make us reassess whether we should put static or active intruder alarms in the school with return to bases.
The Department of School Education expects the damage will cost tens of thousands of dollars. Jane Anderson, NBN News. More than half a century ago, these men were holed up in the North African town of Tobruk. The world was at war and German troops were bearing down on them. Remarkably, the Aussies managed to defend the town.
It was the first time that the Nazi forces in World War II had been stopped and eventually defeated. So this commemorates the 52nd anniversary.
Though the years have depleted their ranks, more than 30 rats of Tobruk gathered at Newcastle's cenotaph to reflect on the events of 1941 and to remember their brothers in arms.
God our Father do, and our Superior.
The night started with the wind in their faces but a full head of steam. David Boyd threw everything at the bears, but his enthusiasm left him with a nasty cut over his eye. Jason Martin wanted to impress against his old club and did just that, chasing down his own kicks and starting the wheels in motion for a night's try. A few minutes later, Jeff Doyle gave Jamie Ainscoe a reminder that the try shouldn't go to his head. The Bears' saving grace came through the boot of Darryl Halligan. By half-time, he'd racked up all his side's 6 points. But Norths weren't going to rest on a 2-point lead and cut loose after the break. A few passes later and John MacArthur was in. From there, they either shut the Knights' play down or forced them into more errors. And with minutes to go, replacement fullback Craig Makepeace put the issue beyond doubt. Final score, North Sydney 16, Knights 4. The day started well enough for the Knights. They found plenty of holes up the middle. But the breaks had no chance of being converted to points because they couldn't hold on to the ball. Unlike last week, the Dropsies weren't confined to the forwards. It was well into the second half before they held on to the ball for 2 sets of 6.
We're giving the ball back to opposition with good field position, and they're just taking advantage of that, and they scored a couple of easy tries yesterday.
The high amount of turnover created flow-on problems. With no ball, they were forced to tackle for nearly the whole game. Despite the handling errors, the Knights definitely looked the better side for the most part, but they just couldn't finish their own good work.
The concentration, I think it's more of a personal thing, basically with a drop ball. We've either got to pick it up and catch the ball, or we just there's no excuses.
Jason Martin had a blinder at half-back. David Boyd and Mark Glanville tackled anything in a Bears jumper. Some bad news though for the Knights. John Schuster will stay in the stands for a few more weeks after re-injuring his thigh, and Brad Godden has a hip injury.
A crowd of about 5,000 people watched as the cars sped and smashed their way around the arena. There was also a good roll-up of competitors, with 120 trying their luck at the Lismore Speedway Cauldron. In the demolition derby category, Casino's Glenn Armstrong came out the winner in car number 83. Lismore's Mick Mayer, car number 93, and Glenn's brother Robert Armstrong, car number 9, were the runners-up. The demolition derby has also been described as boxing with cars. The last car still running from the 30 starters is declared the winner. In the other major event of the night, the modified Stampede, Byron Bay's Andrew Pizzuti in car 2 came out tops. Local lad and reigning Australian champion Steve Robinson in car 1 was a close second, while Newcastle's Mick Turner came third in his purple number 61 car. The last event of the racing calendar will be held at Lismore Speedway on April 24.
Wyong's Bernadette Marshall started confidently, completely wrong-footing her younger opponent. But what Janine Thompson lacked in confidence, she made up for in speedy court coverage. Marshall thought a colour change might throw her younger opponent, but it didn't deter her charges into the net. Marshall had to fight hard in the first set, but eventually won 7-6, 6-2. In the men's final, Newcastle's William O'Neill threw everything into the game. However, the youth of Ashley Fisher gave O'Neill plenty of headaches in the second set. Fisher couldn't keep the pressure up, and O'Neill cleaned up 6-1, 4-6, 6-2.
Around mid-afternoon, traffic began increasing at traditional bottlenecks like north of Raymond Terrace and on John Renshaw Drive, with accidents intensifying the situation. At Charlestown early this afternoon, traffic was flowing with little delay, with southbound traffic on the Pacific Highway diverted due to roadwork. It's the last day for Operation Tortoise. So far, Senior Sergeant Ray Smith is pleased with the results.
Crash-wise, we find that there have been relatively few crashes compared to previous years, and the number of injuries is fairly low.
In the Upper Hunter district, which covers Raymond Terrace, Port Stephens and up to Merriwar, the number of people breath tested was up, but the number charged down. Speeding fines represented the bulk of the traffic infringements. There have been similar figures in the Newcastle, Lake Macquarie and Central Coast Police districts, with the exception of this fatal accident near Terrigal on the weekend, in which 23-year-old Talib Salima died. With Operation Torres, Senior Sergeant Smith says speed is the major concern.
Generally they're between 15 and 30 kilometres an hour above the limit. That's the main category that we're catching people for speeding.
There has been some joy with drink driving charges down on previous years. But there are still some people who persist to drink and drive. Late last night near Muswellbrook, a 38-year-old disqualified driver from Sydney registered a blood alcohol level of more than 4 times the legal limit. And today a 45-year-old Scone man was breath tested on the way to work. His blood alcohol level was double what's legally allowed. Operation Tortoise ends at midnight tonight. The period between now and then police expect to be one of their busiest.
Australian Open cut operations demand a high level of sophistication in their equipment, which is used to move mountains of overburden from rich coal deposits. ICI Explosives specialises in the design of trucks used to mix and pump blasting materials at the mine face. 6 of the vehicles, representing $3 million in orders, are ready for delivery. 2 will go to Hunter mines, others to the West Australian goldfields, 1 to Thailand and another to Vietnam. The units are built from the chassis up by Newcastle companies.
Although we've been operating in Asia Pacific for some time, this is really the beginning of quite a strong push for us.
Over the past 6 years, about 60 of the trucks have trundled out of local workshops. So far, it's been a $23 million industry that keeps more than 100 people in work. ICI Explosives is also expanding backup operations overseas.
We are at the moment building a plant in Vietnam. We've been recently building plants in Hong Kong, and we'll be building a plant in Thailand to support another one of these units as well.
Annette Short was holidaying with family and friends at Frying Pan Creek in the Dungog State Forest north of Newcastle. She'd been with her children by the water when she slipped on a rock and fell on her back. Screaming in pain, she told friends she couldn't feel her feet. An ambulance was immediately called.
I was a bit worried about it, but so were the ambulance officers. Pretty rough in there, the dirt road, so they decided to take her out by helicopter.
Okay. The Westpac chopper landed in a tight valley surrounded by trees. Paramedics stabilised their patient. Annette's husband Rodney said his wife had had back problems before. She was flown to John Hunter Hospital. Her condition tonight is described as stable. She has been cleared of any serious injuries. Peter Ryan, NBN News. The area of Scone in the Hunter Valley is famous for horses and cattle. It may soon become known for these tiny invertebrates, worms. Noel and Elaine Young left life in the city 2 years ago and set up their farm, one of only 15 worm farms in the state.
We trialled it for a few months, bred them successfully, then added to the worm farm, and now from a humble start of some 10 pits we're now on 40, and if I had more water I'd double that.
On a diet of cow dung and stale bread, the worms are thriving. Noel sells his product to fishermen for bait and to gardeners. The worms aerate and rejuvenate the soil. But after discussions with Wyong and Manly councils, the Youngs believe the worms could be used to cut down on domestic garbage, literally eating and burying waste in the backyard. With recycling of cans and bottles, they say worms in each household could cut garbage by 50%.
We're going to have to use worms to break down organic rubbish. Our tips are getting too big and we've got to do something about it.
Meanwhile, the Youngs are selling 200 small tubs, 50 large tubs and about 50 bags of worms a week from Tamworth in the north down to the Central Coast. In a time when traditional agriculture is struggling, this is one farming venture that has got a wriggle on. Peter Ryan, NBN News.